Which, that's not even the most disgustingly inaccurate part of it. I just wanted to complain because I hate Mel Gibson. I'm recording.
After
recording.
27 minutes of trying to get it together.
Look,
I was even on here early.
There's
Yeah, I know,
always
I saw
one
you.
of us.
You know what? I was on 3 minutes early. It was 30
I was
minutes.
going to say, Hannah was on way before me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I was trying to talk to you, and there wasn't anything. You weren't answering.
Well, I couldn't hear anybody. And then I thought you were just, like, fucking around in the background. So I was like, all right, I'll wait.
No.
And then nothing happened for a very long time. Oh,
I was trying to talk to you. It's fine. We fixed it. Yeah. It's all good.
It's fine.
Poor Hannah.
Technology hates me. I'm like Jubilee
really
from the
does.
X-Men, except I'm cooler than her because she's really lame. The end.
Oh,
The
man.
end.
Ugh, excuse me. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and do the intro and announcements because I went back and while I was making my PowerPoint today, I accidentally added like half a page, so we're on 19 pages now.
She did.
So,
she did indeed.
Yeah.
Every time.
Hi, everybody. You're listening to The Triad, where we're spooky but sensitive. I'm Shannon.
I'm Shelby.
And I'm Hannah.
Okay, do we have any announcements? Preferably quick ones. We got a lot to get through.
Look, I know we've said this a lot, but please, 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 for the love of God, if you can get vaccinated, get vaccinated.
Oh my
And
God,
boosted.
please.
And boosted, and
yeah.
whether you
Wear
are
a mask.
vaccinated or not vaccinated, please wear a fucking mask and stay distant and just yeah. That's all. That's all.
Mm-hmm.
A lot happened today. Hannah, I will
Yeah.
text you about it.
Yeah, a lot happened today. And then she was already, I don't know if upset's the right word, but it was on your mind, all the stuff that happened today.
Yeah.
And then a bunch of Supreme Court bullshit happened that made me mad. Yeah, but we're not going to get into that, because otherwise I will rant about it for 25 minutes, which we're not going to do. My announcement is, so, like, I have my job at school, which is great. I love my job. And it pays enough for me to live off of, but not enough for me to live off of and pay tuition comfortably. Plus, I would like to be, like, saving money occasionally. So I got my substitute teacher license, like, a month ago at this point. And I have an interview on Wednesday to do for substitute teaching, substitute secretary, because they're hiring those two, and for tutoring. So.
Yeah, they're gonna snap you right up because
Yeah, they are.
there's nobody. Dude, our entire admin is out with COVID right now. I don't know if I should have said that, but whatever. You don't know where I teach.
You can. It's fine. You can say that. That's not an illegal thing for you to be saying. They're hiring substitute maintenance workers, substitute bus drivers. They're hiring substitute admins, which I would apply for, but they want you to have like an actual teaching license to do that, and I don't, so I can't do that.
Honestly, they'd probably still interview you at this point.
I mean,
they really would.
It pays $300 a day. And I have 3
What?
days I know. And I have, that's the thing. So
me?
I know. For substitute that's for substitute admin, not for substitute teaching.
No, I know.
Yeah.
Shannon, I'm so fucking upset right now because even when I was subbing, it wasn't nearly that much. And now when I have a job that is harder than most admin jobs, that just makes me so mad.
Yeah.
Oh my God. I can't.
Yeah, but then they're hiring substitute teaching, which, like I said, I do have the license. That starts at like $140 a day. But then since I have my degree, it's going to be a little bit higher. And then they're hiring a substitute secretary, which that goes by, it's an hourly pay, but it's only going to be like $30 or $40 less a day than substitute teaching. And honestly, I would rather do substitute secretary than substitute teaching. But I can do both. And then, they're hiring tutors for like certain subjects, and that's like an extra $20 a day. for tutoring. So, yeah. And then with my work schedule, I'm only, like, on the ref desk 2 days a week. So I have 3 open days to do this every week, which would be awesome. So yeah, hopefully that goes well. I don't see why it wouldn't, because they're kind of desperate for bodies at the moment. And I need money, but we will see. Oh, and then my mom.
Yeah.
So basically, okay, so I was FaceTiming with my sister so I could see her puppy. And then my mom walked in because she had to take Allie to the doctor because Allie was getting knocked out to get her stomach scoped, so she needed somebody to drive her home. So my mom walked in.
Because she is an old man.
Yes, because she is an old man. And so my mom just walked in. I was like, "Oh, Mom." And she was like, "Oh, good, you're already on the phone. I wanted to talk to you both at the same time so you don't yell at me separately." And I was like, "Oh, God, what happened?" So her work, somehow someone hired...
Pause.
What?
Did she fall for another email scam?
No, she did not fall for an email scam.
Okay.
No, she didn't. No. So someone higher up than her got some kind of work trip to Maui, right? And, like, it's one of those, like, vendor-sponsored things, you know? And nobody wanted it, and so it passed all the way down the chain to my mom. So they're going to Maui in March. And so they were going to go from, like, the Saturday to Tuesday. And so they were like, we're already going that far. Let's just extend it for the whole week. And so my mom went to her boss and was like, hey, I need to take off that whole week now because we're extending the trip. And he was like, oh, okay, we'll pay for that. And she was like, what? And they were like, you deserve it. We're going to pay for this whole trip. So she is getting a fully paid trip to Maui.
Yeah, she deserves it.
Yeah.
I was going to say, your mom is the most loyal employee they have ever had.
I know.
She really is. They do not deserve her.
I know.
Job.
And she is, like, the only, like, her and, like, 2 other people are the only reason that company has not completely failed at this point.
Right.
And so she didn't mean, like, yell, because we were both like, well, I want to go to Maui, but she didn't want to hear it from us separately.
Yeah.
But yeah, so my mom gets a free trip to Hawaii in March.
That's awesome. She deserves it.
And she doesn't have to do any work thing at all.
It's like a work trip, and she was like, I can go and, like, schmooze with some people if I have to. And they were like, no, if you don't want to talk to people, then don't talk to people.
Yeah.
I don't do it when I go.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
She's like, so I can just go sit on a beach for a week? Hell yeah.
Yeah. Because, like, my stepdad, they go on a trip like that every year, sponsored by different tire companies, but he always has to go to meetings and shit, and then my mom just goes with him to go, like, wander around a Mexican resort by herself, and so I thought it was something like that, but she doesn't have to...
Just the way you phrase that scares me.
It's a resort. Yeah. Like, the resorts are really, really safe.
I know, but just your mom wandering gives me
I know! She's
pause.
not the type to... She's not the type that you feel secure that she's wandering alone by herself.
No, because she would come back and she would be like... She would come back and be like, it was so funny, I was kidnapped by this drug cartel. And,
I know.
Good time.
I know. But yeah,
like,
so
we're
my
best
mom...
friends now.
Yeah, so my mom got a free trip to Hawaii, and then they're going to... She keeps saying they're going to Mexico. I thought they were going to the Dominican Republic in April for one of the tire trips, so I don't know where the fuck she's going for that, but she's also going to either the Dominican Republic or Mexico.
Oh my god, get it together, Mom.
Yeah. But yeah, so my mom had a very good day yesterday. And I'm happy for my mother because they don't treat her well a lot of the time.
Yeah.
That's it.
So she's basically
like
just waiting it out
for like
until
the
she
last
can retire.
15 years of her life.
Probably like 20 or 25. She's worked there for more than 20 years.
A really
and it's
long
never been
time.
Great.
Yeah,
but yeah, so my mom is happy. And that's really all I got, because that's all that has happened to me since Saturday, since we last recorded. So, okay, now we can go to the topic. There's only like 9 minutes of intro. That's not too bad. Okay. So, we are talking about
Shannon's 20 pages of notes again.
19.
It was.
And it's 18. It's 18 in like a paragraph. It's not like, it's fine.
Don't justify your misstep.
I'm not justifying it. I'm correcting.
Yes.
It's fine. Okay.
She's going for accuracy here.
about, yes, we are talking about the Lost Colony of Roanoke. And the reason why it's so long is because I get into a lot of, like, the background context because I think it's necessary to explain some of the theories as to what happened.
Also, she goes on a tangent that she told me about that is not related in any way, but, you know.
It's like a 3-line thing. It's fine. Okay,
I know.
So, my sources are Wikipedia, obviously, Discover Magazine, Live Science, Artnet.com, Snopes, a couple New York Times articles, stuff from the First Colony Foundation, which that is a nonprofit that is working on excavating certain sites on Roanoke Island. I have something from, I think it's Smith College. Whoops, I didn't mean to open that. I just wanted to look at the link. I pulled it from Google Books, but it is a contemporary account of things, which we'll get into later. I have something from encyclopedia.com. And very regretfully, I have something from the Zombie Research Society.
That was my first question when we found out that this was going to be Shannon's topic. I was like, are you talking about zombies? Please say yes.
Also a source that
unfortunately, yes,
she probably didn't use in her notes, but the reason why we are doing this is because she and I were binging BuzzFeed Unsolved. And
oh my god, that makes so much sense.
This episode of theirs came up and she got so angry.
I got annoyed because, and like, this is the thing with a lot of, I'm not saying BuzzFeed Unsolved is the only show that does this. They are presenting all of the theories as if they are equally valid, and they're fucking not. So I was getting annoyed.
Yes, again, this is nothing against BuzzFeed Unsolved. We love the show. No. Literally, this is like the 6th time we've binged it since we've lived together, so.
Yeah.
Oh
no, like,
look, we rotate.
It's like the second.
Yeah, it's the second. But we rotate through like 3 shows.
Yeah.
And that's it.
Yeah.
We're very simple people.
I just need background noise. Okay, so a couple notes is I'm going to be using the term Native Americans quite a bit when generally discussing Native American tribes. But I will use tribe names as much as I can. And then there are some, like, important Native American, like, figures and tribes in this story. So I looked up pronunciations, and I, like, put them after the name every single time so that I wouldn't forget it. I apologize if the pronunciation I use is not correct. Also, I couldn't find pronunciations for a few of them, so I'm just guessing on those. And then I always note when I couldn't find a pronunciation and apologize profusely for not knowing how to say it. So, just get that out of the way.
You know what would make that really helpful? If fucking Wikipedia would give phonetic transcriptions.
It really
Wikipedia,
would.
Can you please just do this for Shelby so she'll shut up about it?
Shelby will never shut up about it.
You'll have to drag my corpse away.
And I know that that's not Wikipedia's job because Wikipedia is, like, run by the public.
Yeah.
However,
user created.
So, like, I get it. I do. I just want phonetic transcriptions on literally everything all the time.
Well, and not the problem. All of these names are in Algonquin.
Oh, yeah.
So, pronunciations are a lot harder to find.
Yeah.
Even if they had the phonetic one, I don't even know if that would be correct.
That's true, yeah.
So, anyway.
Yes.
Moving on. Just to sum it up, we're going to talk about, like, background now. Just to sum it up so that I can provide, like, this context and people actually know, like, what the heck we're talking about, just in case people haven't heard of this. So, this colony that we're discussing was established by an English group of colonists in 1587 on Roanoke Island, which is an island off the coast of what is now North Carolina, but at the time was part of the Virginia colony. So if you can go to slide 2... This is just a Google Maps screenshot of where this is. And so that region, like, is now called the Outer Banks, because it's just a bunch of barrier islands, so they call it the Outer Banks.
I said that to some Mainers yesterday, and they had no idea what I was talking about.
What?
The Outer Banks. I was like, they're like,
there's literally an entire show about it on Netflix.
Yeah, I was like, you know, the Outer Banks, like, where everyone in North Carolina goes to the beach. Nope, they didn't know. Anyway, It's fine. Moving on.
Someone in law school, when I told them I was from like Southern Illinois near St. Louis, they said, "Oh, the Quad Cities area," and I said, "No, that's not even remotely what I said."
What?
I didn't say it like that. So I don't begrudge people who don't know geography from different states, because a lot of people don't know geography in their own states.
That's true. People are
Yeah, and I fully understand that from a citizen point of view, but in like military schools, they're just like, you're gonna learn the geography of the entire fucking planet. So.
Yeah, no, we don't do that.
Yeah, I had to take a geography.
Don't do that.
I had to take a geography test, and it was run by an Air Force spouse about the topographical. It was a topographical test about Montana, so we had to name all the mountain ranges and shit.
Yeah, and like they're literally like, you're gonna know, like, yeah, it's kind of crazy sometimes. I'm not speaking for like every military school. Like, obviously that's not. That's a generalization. However, the ones that I went to, they were like, you're gonna know where every country on the entire planet is. So.
Yeah, I just had to learn state capitals and then maybe where the states were located, and that was in like 4th grade, and that was pretty much it. And then I did take geography in high school. Don't remember anything from it.
Label maps of Europe. That was fun.
Yeah, I don't think I ever had.
Knowing where Estonia is.
Anyway, so that region is Outer Banks. And as I said, it was part of the Virginia colony. This is that tiny little tangent because I thought it was interesting.
Yes.
So, the Virginia territory, colony, whatever, was fucking gigantic. And they started carving it up later on down the line. So the province of Carolina wasn't carved out of Virginia until 1629. It wasn't made an actual colony officially until 1663. And it wasn't divided into North and South until 1712. So, like I said, this was the Virginia colony. Now it is North Carolina. Also,
not to butt in again, but I didn't know this until I moved up here, but Maine was part of Massachusetts until not too long ago.
I did actually know that.
Anyway, news to me. Thank you. Goodbye.
I think also Maine became a state in order to balance the free state and slave states, if I remember
Certainly
correctly.
did.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that's what I thought. Okay, and then also, because I didn't actually know why we had a North and a South Carolina, so I looked it up while I was doing this. They were only split because the actual, like, the physical territory was huge, and it was just administratively, it was easier to have them be separate. So, like, they had a governor for the whole territory and then a deputy governor for just the northern half beginning in 1691. So then in 1712, they just split them up because it was easier. That's the only reason why we have both of them. I don't know why they didn't rename North or South Carolina to something completely different. I don't know, but they didn't.
Because lazy.
I don't know. So that is why we have two Carolinas, in case people were wondering. So,
I was wondering. Thank you.
Yeah. So back to Roanoke, the reason we still talk about this colony is that its residents just completely disappeared, and we were never able to concretely say what happened to them.
Can you hear my stomach? It is being so loud.
19 pages, Shelby. There are so many theories.
Look, you know what state of consciousness I'm working with right now.
I know. And then, yeah, I do want to talk about what happened before, like, this colony was established because it helps set up support for some of the theories. So, the Outer Banks region was originally explored by Europeans in 1524 by an Italian explorer named Giovanni da Marazzano. God, I practiced that too. So if you can go to slide 3, this is just like a more zoomed in version of that area. So the Outer Banks are a bunch of barrier islands around a sound, and then a sound in this context is like the lagoon between the barrier islands and the mainland, but a sound can also be a sea channel or something similar to a fjord. It has like really inconsistent usage. Mm-hmm. Either way, he mistook the sound for the Pacific Ocean and thought that he had found a shortcut to China, because of course he fucking did. So
confusing North Carolina with China.
A shortcut to China. Yeah.
Oh,
so he presented,
Lord.
And like,
white people are dumb.
So dumb. And they were looking for trade routes to China quicker because of the spice trade and the Silk Road and all that nonsense. So he presented his findings to both King Francis I of France and King Henry VIII of England, but neither were interested. So then 50...
Just Francis of France.
I know! Francis I of France. Like...
And Francis I of France.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
Such a press.
Yeah. Wait, what'd you say?
I said sassafras.
We're gonna talk about sassafras later.
No.
Oh,
yes, I'm not even kidding. We're gonna talk about sassafras later. Okay.
I'm a psychic.
So, 50-ish years later, I guess someone told Queen Elizabeth I about this land that existed. That or she just knew because Spain was there and she wanted to fuck up Spain. Either way, she granted a land charter to Sir Humphrey Gilbert to, quote, explore and colonize territories unclaimed by Christian kingdoms, end quote. Which, like, don't even get me fucking started. So, if you go to slide 4, that is Queen Elizabeth on the left, and I believe Sir Humphrey Gilbert on the right. It's, the 1500s, so I think that's him, but who knows?
Who knows?
Paint an inch thick, bitch.
What?
I said paint an inch. It's a line from Hamlet. Never mind.
Oh.
Except for the bitch part. Because Queen Elizabeth wore a bunch of makeup and it rotted her face off because it was lead based. And in Hamlet, Hamlet tells Ophelia to paint an inch thick. Like, go put on makeup. You're so damn ugly.
Yeah.
Anyway, that was a really deep cut that only me and like 4 other people on the podcast
I just didn't hear the first part of it. But
you cut out, so I couldn't hear it.
Paint an inch thick.
Anyway, so Gilbert understood this to mean go explore and colonize. I'm going to say that a lot. Colonize the New World north of Spanish Florida. Because Spain had already claimed most of the southeastern what is now the southeastern United States for themselves, and they just called it Spanish Florida. So go north of that and claim it for England, basically. Also,
we can have the English Wikipedia page, Florida.
No, because Florida is a Spanish word. Also, the Wikipedia page for Spanish Florida notes that Florida was, quote, never more than a backwater region for Spain, and served primarily as a strategic buffer between Mexico, Spain's Caribbean colonies, and the expanding English colonies to the north, which I just thought was funny. Because Florida's always been trash, is what I read that as.
Yes. Everyone
They built
Florida.
St. Augustine, and they were like, this is cool, let's go north. And they were like, this is shit, let's stay south.
Yeah.
And that's how Florida has always been.
Yes. So yeah, Gilbert ended up dying in 1583, so only like a few years after giving this charter before he was really able to do anything with it. And so the way this works is that it's kind of basically this charter, it is giving you property, basically. So in theory, he owned all of this land. Technically, basically he owned this land in the quote-unquote New World. And after he died, it had to be given to somebody. But because the queen was the one who granted it, she got to choose who it went to. So she divided the charter between Gilbert's brother Adrian and his half-brother, Sir Walter Raleigh. So if you can go to slide 5, this is Sir Walter Raleigh.
And now let's name everything in the Carolinas after him.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, so Adrian's lands were basically what is now Canada and like parts of New England. So it was like the Newfoundland territory.
What's up, my Mainers?
Yeah. And then Raleigh got what is now the southeastern United States, which, as I already noted, was mostly controlled by Spain. So they already didn't have a claim to it because, like, people were already there. You can't just go into somewhere and take their land, but whatever. But if you're assuming that you do have the right to do that, Spain had already claimed that land, so they doubly should not have been there. And, yeah, England and Spain were in the middle of a lot of battling because they always were.
Yeah.
So Raleigh's charter said that he had to establish a permanent colony by 1591 or he would lose it. And then it was expected that any colony he established would act as a kind of like base from which England could continue its fight against Spain because Elizabeth was constantly warring with Spain. It was a whole thing. We'll get into that a little bit later. So, for various reasons, Raleigh was not allowed to leave the Queen's side, basically, so he sent people to set up the colony for him. First, they just kind of like scouted out the area. So this first expedition was the Amatus Barlow expedition in 1584. So he like jumped on it. Like the next year, he was already sending people over. And yeah, they were just sent to scout out the area, and they landed at what is now Cape Fear in North Carolina, which I forgot to get a map of, but it's somewhere on that coast, obviously. And then they encountered Native Americans on this trip. I do know which tribe. It's in my next fucking bullet point. Okay. So there had already been Spanish colonies in the area for about 20 years. So the Native Americans in the area were not unfamiliar with, like, Europeans. They just didn't know any English people. The only Europeans they knew were Spaniards. And so the island where they landed was under the control of the Second Nation, which included several different tribes, including the Croatan, Chesapeake, and Roanoke tribes. So if you can go to slide 6, the one on the left is just like an illustration of one of their villages. The one on the right is a map with some of their different tribal villages. So during this expedition, they were able to establish friendly relations with the Secotans and even brought 2 Native American men back with them. So there was Wanchese, which, again, that's one of those... There is now a town in North Carolina called that. But I don't know if the pronunciation that the internet gave to me is the correct one or is the English bastardization of the correct one.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So Wanchese was the last known leader of the Roanoke tribal village. And then they also brought back Manteo. He was a Croatan whose mother was chieftain of Croatan Island. I don't know what the difference is between Croatan and Croatoan. They're the same. I think they're the same thing. They're just different spellings or pronunciations that were used interchangeably. I want to throw that out there now because they are literally just used interchangeably.
I wonder if one was like a misspelling back in the day.
I'm thinking so. Or maybe like they just pronounced it in a way that it sounded like there wasn't, or there was an extra letter.
Yeah, based off of like accents and stuff.
Yeah, that's what I'm... Maisie, stop it!
Oh no, Maisie, what's happening?
Maisie, why are you screaming? Hey! Come here, babe. What's wrong?
Why are you screaming?
Okay. Anyway, I would have included illustrations of these 2 men, but the only ones I could find are basically racist caricatures, so we're not going to look at those.
I hate that. Okay.
Yeah. Well, because they're just illustrations of Native Americans done by white dudes. Like, they're not accurate. And so their role was to teach the Carolina Algonquin language to Raleigh's, like, team back in England. Yeah. And then Manteo stayed friendly with the English throughout this, but then Wanchese never really trusted them and officially ended their good relationship when he returned to Roanoke in 1586. Just so that everyone knows.
Okay.
So all of this together impressed Queen Elizabeth and Raleigh, so Raleigh began fundraising for a colony in 1585. So there was actually a colony before Roanoke, but it, like, immediately failed.
Okay.
So the first colony was mostly a military operation focused on exploration and evaluation of natural resources. So they left England in April of 1585. A man named Ralph Lane was named the governor of this new colony, which was called the Lane Colony. So if you can go to slide 7, this is an illustration of the fort that they built at the colony. I couldn't find an illustration of Lane that I thought might be him. As far as I can tell, all the colonists were men, which would make sense since it was military, not like actual colonization. So these men included John White.
I can't tell if I'm just like the perspective of this. Is it like dug into the ground?
I don't think so. I think those are walls, and just the shading makes it look like it's dug.
Okay,
They may have dug like a trench around the walls of some kind for some reason.
We're looking at a picture of what's called the Star Fort.
Yeah.
And it's just very bizarre, this illustration.
Okay, okay. I couldn't tell if I was, like, sleep deprived. Like,
this is also an artist rendition, so it might be...
Yeah, their perspective might be off. He may have done that just to show...
Something. He may have done that just to show that there are walls.
Yeah.
By making the ground around it look different. I don't know.
Okay. That's totally fine.
I don't know literally anything about this fort other than that it existed.
That's fine.
So yeah, all these colonists were guys. These included John White, who becomes important later on. And, fun fact, it included a man named Joachim Gons, I believe. He was from what is now the Czech Republic. It was called Bohemia at the time. He was a metallurgist, and he was the first Jewish person in North America.
That's cool.
Which I thought was cool. Yeah. So I'm not going to go into, like, too much detail about this colony. well, I kind of am, but I'm skipping over some stuff and shortening it. It failed, as I said, it failed almost immediately. So one of the 7 ships in the fleet on the way there, they struck a shoal en route, and the ship that struck a shoal apparently had like all of the food.
Oh my god.
And it got ruined, which meant that the colonists couldn't winter over to set up a base, which is like kind of the whole point of them being there. So only about 100 of the 600 men in the fleet stayed in the colony after they initially arrived. The rest went back to England because they knew that they couldn't support all of those people. They were supposed to get support from a second set of ships that left England in June, but that group got redirected to Newfoundland because of activity by the Spanish Armada. So that's so they never got that support, really.
Gotcha.
While waiting for the support that never arrived, because it's not like they know that the ship got rerouted, the colonists were exploring the area and attempting to maintain relations with the Second tribes. This did not go very well, shockingly enough.
Crazy.
So pretty soon after landing, the colonists discovered that a silver cup was missing, and they believed that the Native Americans from a nearby tribe called the Aquascagog. This one I couldn't find a pronunciation. I'm so sorry if that's wrong. They believed that Native Americans from the Aquascagog tribe were responsible for this. I don't know why they did, but they did. So when the village inhabitants could not produce the cup, the Englishmen responded by burning down the entire village and all of its crops.
That is...
For stealing a cup. Not even stealing a cup. They don't know if they stole the cup.
Okay.
Yeah. They had decided this was necessary in order to avoid the appearance of weakness, which, like, you asked them for a cup that they didn't have. I don't see how that makes you look weak, but whatever. So on top of this, the colonists were over-reliant on Second crops and supplies, especially during that winter, which they burned down an entire village's crops, so that didn't help. But they really relied on the Second to provide them food and other supplies, and after a while the Secondons were like, hey, we need shit too, can you maybe like back off a little bit? So by spring the relations were just awful. Plus, like, it's winter in the 1500s. I feel like everybody gets really testy during winter in the 1500s, so like that didn't help. And then relations among some of the tribes were also not great, as they were fighting for territory, and the colonists exploited that to gain a leg up.
Of course they
in
did.
Like exploring the area safely. Hannah, are you still there?
Yes.
Okay, I'm just making sure. I'm really paranoid that you're just gonna lose us again.
If anything, I would lose you.
I know, but I'm just paranoid. So yeah, there were also some new chieftains, like, who were, like, whenever the Englishmen landed, the chieftain of a certain tribe would be friendly with them, but then over that winter, either they died or just passed on the title, and the new chieftains were not always fans of the colonists, which added to this tension. So there was just a lot of fighting and arguing, and, like, it was just bad. So General by June,
discord.
The relationships were just trash beyond the repair. The colonists had murdered the leader of one of the tribes, and English reinforcements had still not arrived. So in June, the colonists were able to make contact with the fleet led by Sir Francis Drake, and they ended up evacuating the colony with him in 1586. So they made it less than a year as a colony. They also brought Manteo, who was still friendly with the colonists. They brought him with them back to England, and they brought one of his associates named Toway. Couldn't find a pronunciation for him either. I couldn't find literally any information on this man other than that he went back to England with Manteo. I don't know the tribe. I don't know literally anything.
Weird.
I don't know why, but when you said his associate, it just kind of cracked me up, because it just reminds me of, like, the Mafia, where it's like, this is my associate.
I don't think it was like that, but...
Are you sure?
I mean, I don't think it was like that.
Okay.
So then, they left in June. 2 weeks later, a relief fleet arrived.
Oh my god.
Oh my god.
Which I don't think it would have helped anyway, honestly.
Yeah.
So they ended up leaving behind 15 men to maintain an English presence and protect Raleigh's claim to the land, which, like, what the fuck ever. So they
15 men are gonna protect it. Yep.
Also, just the term English presence made my skin crawl.
Well, I mean, you might like what ends up happening to them. So they interrogated some Native Americans about where the entire colony went, and they told them about the evacuation. So they knew like, what had happened to the previous colony. And then the group of 15 was pretty much immediately attacked.
That's too bad.
Probably by some mainland tribes. I couldn't find an exact tribe. 2 were killed immediately, but the remaining survivors fled the island and were never seen ever again.
I'm trying really hard to find sympathy.
I know. So technically there are 2 missing colonies on Roanoke.
Yeah, like, why didn't we ever hear about them?
Because there were only 15 people.
They were the first zombies.
Yeah. Ugh.
They were patient zero.
So, yeah. So at this point, we have a failed colony. But Raleigh still has to establish a successful one, relatively, by 1591 or he'll lose his charter. And he was a power-hungry egomaniac, so he wasn't going to lose his charter. And, yeah, so he was still pretty motivated to colonize the New World. So this new colony... Yeah, so he set up a new colony. I forgot to just include that sentence. So he started setting up for a new colony. They left in May of 18... I did this so many times. 1587. I kept putting 1857. It was in 1587.
Gotcha.
And they meant to settle at Chesapeake Bay, not at Roanoke. So Chesapeake Bay is about 115 miles north of Roanoke Island. So if you go to slide 8... This is just, I marked them both on Google Maps so you can see where they are, basically.
That giant crash you just heard was my cat leaping into the microphone.
I did not hear a crash, but good to know.
Hi. Say hello to everybody.
And
hi, Pippa.
They chose Chesapeake Bay because they believed the Pacific Ocean was just on the other side of the explored areas of the Virginia territory.
I can see her purrs on the...
Oh, that's cute.
On the thing. Sorry.
No, you're fine.
You're so cute.
So this time, they were doing like a colony, not like a military-based colony. They had about 115 people. The manifest that I found on Wikipedia, which I don't know if it's accurate or not, but it listed 91 men, 17 women, and 9 children, plus Mateo and Toway, who were not counted as colonists because, like, they're not colonists.
Mateo and his associate.
So these colonists were largely middle-class Londoners who wanted to become landed gentry. So basically, they wanted to become aristocrats with land, and there wasn't any more land that they could have in England. So they were going to go take it from
So you're going to go to...
the other side of the planet.
1, you're going to steal a bunch of people's land.
Mm-hmm.
And 2, you're going to set up your version of society where there is no... cultivated version of your society, and then you're gonna be the rich people, even though you're the only people there. God.
Yeah.
Flawless logic.
Yep.
I know. It's, yeah. So, there were a few, like, notable colonists, I guess. Like, there's John White, who I talked about earlier. So if you go to slide 9, this is John White. He was made governor of the new colony. His daughter, Eleanor Dare, was pregnant during the voyage. We kind of talk about her later. And then her husband is also mentioned. I think just because he was her husband, his name was Ananias Dare. I know literally nothing important about either of them beyond the fact that she was pregnant. And he was her husband.
Was the first, wasn't it the first?
Well, no, I'm going to get into that. I mean, like, for them,
shit.
Those 2, personally, I don't know any information about those 2 other than that information. So the plan was, because remember, they're going to Chesapeake, not to Roanoke, but they wanted to stop at Roanoke, like, on the way and convene with the 15 men who had been left behind the previous year, because they didn't know that they weren't there anymore. So there were 3 ships in the fleet, and they landed between July 22nd and 25th. Like, they landed on different days, because one kind of lagged behind. So they found the former Lane colony almost immediately, because, like, it wouldn't have been that hard to find. But they noted that the houses were abandoned and there was no evidence that anyone was living there. And this would have been about a year after the 15 men had been left behind, so they'd been gone for a year. But they still were like, they disembarked. They were like, we're just going to hang out here for a little bit, try to figure out what's going on. With Mateo's assistance, the colonists attempted to reestablish relations with the Croatoan tribe. The Croatoans told them that they believed some mainland tribes, led by Wanchus, who was that other Native American man who had been brought to England before, had attacked the 15 men. We don't know if that's true or not, but that's what the Croatoans told them. Not that it's not true inherently, just that You know what I mean? Just that's what they told them. That's the only information that they had. The colonists attempted to negotiate a truce with these tribes through the Croatoan, but they never got a response. But they did succeed in accidentally attacking Croatoan looters who were going through a now abandoned Second Nation village. Basically, a native of a different tribe killed one of the colonists of this new group. I don't know if it was on purpose or an accident. I just know that he killed this guy. I think his name was Greg Howe. I know the last name was Howe and the first name was a G, but I can't remember. Excuse me. And the entire tribe fled their village in fear of reprisal.
Wait.
And then, yes.
Not that I'm not believing you, but like I just can't imagine a early colonist named Greg.
That's like it might not have been Greg. It may have been I don't remember.
Okay.
It just started with a G. But yeah, so this tribal village had been abandoned just like a couple days before this all happened, with a span of like a few days. So after they left it, Croatoan tribe Native Americans were going through the abandoned village when the colonists attacked, because they were going to, they attacked because they were like, well, you killed one of our people, so we're going to attack, which is what the Native Americans were afraid of, which is why they left. But they didn't know that they had left, so they accidentally ended up attacking their allies.
Oh my god.
That ended up, Lord. They were able to patch things up, but that did happen. And then on August 18th, Eleanor Dare gave birth to a daughter named Virginia. So you can go to slide 10. This is an illustration of her baptism from 1876, so it's not even remotely close to accurate. I just wanted another slide.
Cool.
And Virginia was the first English child born in the New World. So.
Gotcha.
There's that. So then there are a couple of parts here.
I'm sorry, but the way that you emphasized that sentence makes it sound like she was the first English child born in America, which implies that there was an English adult born in America.
Oh.
And I know that, like, obviously that is not possible, but it was just the way you said it. My brain was like, what? Also, I'm just very delirious.
Yes. Okay, so there are a couple points here where there are gaps in the timeline that I couldn't figure out. So I couldn't figure out why the group didn't continue to Chesapeake Bay, because they were originally just going to stop there, convene with the 15 guys who had been left behind, and then go. But they didn't, and I couldn't figure out why. The First Colony Foundation, on their history section, stated that the master pilot, who was a Portuguese explorer named Simon Fernandez, refused to take them any further. That's the only that's the only source I could find that had any explanation as to why they didn't move. I don't know why. And then I also just kept finding vague references to the difficulties the colonists were facing and the fact that they needed more supplies. I couldn't get an explanation as to what difficulties those were or what caused them. So I don't actually know what the problem was. I know that they needed more supplies. I don't know why, but they did. I will note that data, I thought this was cool, data collected from tree rings indicate that the colony was founded and disappeared during the most extreme local drought in the past 800 years up at that point.
That's a lot.
Yeah, which that was all caused by the Little Ice Age, and it was a whole thing.
Yeah.
But that that probably caused a crop and general subsistence shortage. And then that, coupled with the hostile relations with native tribes, probably left the colonists feeling like they needed a little bit of help. Because as far as I could tell, they didn't have any, military people in the group, so they were at a disadvantage when it came to fighting, physically fighting with native tribes if they needed to do so. But, I also couldn't figure out why they didn't have enough supplies in the first place. There were just a lot of gaps. I just know that the ships decided to go back to England and leave the colonists on Roanoke Island instead of continuing north to Chesapeake Bay. And I know that the colonists persuaded Governor White to return to England with the fleet so that he could basically beg for supplies and more people. He didn't want to go, but he reluctantly agreed, and they left on August 27th, 1857, and got back to England in early November. They had only, everyone who left, they had only been on Roanoke Island for about 6 weeks before they decided to send people back for more supplies. So something went wrong.
Yeah.
But I have no idea what.
Like, how did you run out of supplies like that?
That quickly. Like, you knew how many people were going. We kind of get into this later because we talk about Jamestown later. Jamestown, like, fully planned on relying on the natives for supplies. So I don't know if they were also doing that at Roanoke.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Also, that's just such a presumptuous...
It's so fucking stupid. It's so stupid. We'll get into that later.
Duh.
Yeah, we'll get into that later.
Colonization. Fuck colonialism.
Yes.
Okay.
But yeah, so Governor White returned to England in early November of 1857, and they'd only been there for about 6 weeks. And then enter the Spanish Armada. So we go to slide 11. This is an illustration of a fight with the Spanish Armada.
Fire.
And like,
wow.
Yeah, the Spanish Armada had been very active before this, but they didn't really
the Spanish Armada was not fucking around.
No, they just hadn't become relevant to the story until now, which is why I'm not talking about them until now. So, the Spanish Armada was basically a massive fleet of Spanish ships, and they've been fucking up English trade routes and colonization attempts for quite a long time. And they really wanted to overthrow Queen Elizabeth for various reasons.
Because she was a bitch to Catholics, that's why.
Yeah, that's why. And to be fair, yeah, also, English ships have been fucking up Spanish shit for just as long, right? So that was another part of the reason why they wanted to overthrow Queen Elizabeth, because it was okay for them to mess with England, but not okay for England to mess with them, basically. So, at the time White returned to England, like right in like that same week, news had reached the Queen that the Armada was going to try and attack London, instead of just like having naval battles. They were actually going to try to attack London. So, to combat this, she prohibited any able ship from leaving England so they could participate in the upcoming battle. So, White couldn't go back, because he couldn't get a ship to go back. The Spanish Armada was defeated in August of 1588, so about a year after he got back, but ships still couldn't leave, because Queen Elizabeth launched the Counter Armada to start attacking Spain in 1589. So he still couldn't go back. All of this meant White could not return to Roanoke Colony until 1590, 3 years after he had left. Which, like, in theory is fine. You know, you hope that they figured out a way to either become friendly enough with the natives to, you know, survive with their aid, or that they were able to, like, subsist on their own, you know? They weren't expecting anything, like, majorly bad whenever they got back. So he went back he landed back on Croatoan Island on August 12th of 1590. The 1590 relief mission was a mess and a half. So they anchored at Croatoan Island.
Yeah, I believe it.
Yeah, they anchored at Croatoan Island on August 12th. And so if you go to the next slide, apparently you can drive between, it's now called Hatteras Island. This is just the distance between the two. It's like a 50 or 60 mile difference. So, and then Croatoan Island is like, yeah, it's about 50 or 60 miles south of Roanoke Island. There is no indication that they attempted to contact the Croatoans who were living on this island. So, a few days later, they spotted plumes of smoke over on Roanoke Island, so they started heading that way. Plus, again, that's where they were. That's where they knew the colony was. It's a whole thing. Apparently, it was very difficult to get across the Sound because it took them 2 or 3 days to get over there, and like a bunch of people died.
What?
Again, I don't know why, but
okay.
Yeah. So they made it to Roanoke Island on August 18th, which was Virginia Dare's 3rd birthday, by the way.
Happy
so after they landed,
birthday.
they started making their way towards the colony, which was on the northern end of the island, so they still had to go like across the whole island. They were getting closer to the colony. They found a tree that had the letters CRO carved into it. I don't know how far away the tree was from the colony, but it was not like in the colony. When they found the colony, they noted that it had been fortified with a palisade, which is basically a fancy fence. And then this is a quote from Wikipedia. Within the palisade, the search party found that houses had been dismantled and everything that could have been carried had been removed. Several large trunks, including 3 belonging to White, containing the belongings he left behind in 1587, had been dug up and looted. None of the colony's boats could be found along the shore. And then they found the word Croatoan carved into one of the fence posts. So if you can go to slide 13, this is that famous illustration of the word Croatoan.
That's an
What does it mean?
Which they carved it into a fence post, not a fucking tree, but whatever. So White noted that there was no sign of any kind of battle or attack, and there were no visible human remains or indications that anyone had been buried. Plus, like, they basically dismantled the whole place. So he interpreted all of this to be indications that the colonists had left to go live with the Croatoans.
Crazy.
He knew that they had, before he left, they had been debating moving about 50 miles inland. And they had agreed that if they did move, they would leave some kind of sign behind.
Hey,
so
look, a sign.
Exactly. So seeing the signs, like seeing all these indications, he assumed that the colonists had moved to Croatoan Island instead of going inland. He had just come from Croatoan Island, so they decided to turn around and go back. So they got back to their ships, they had 3 ships, and tried to go back to Croatoan Island. There were 2 issues. One is that one of the ships lost an anchor, which increased the risk of shipwreck. There's so many shipwrecks in this goddamn story, because apparently, around North Carolina, the ocean is trying to kill you at all times.
Apparently.
So,
Jesus.
there's so many shipwrecks. The crew of this ship and White, they all decided to winter over in the Caribbean and return in the spring. Like, that was their plan. But that ship, problem 2, it got blown off course so badly, they had to stop for supplies in the fucking Azores.
Oh my god.
Which, that's over near, like, Portugal, right? I forgot to get a map.
Yes.
Yep.
It's like, yeah. So, very far away. And then, whenever they got to the Azores, heavy winds prevented them from actually landing at the Azores. So they were forced then to return to England, because otherwise they would have run out of supplies. And then no one ever saw the colonists ever again. So.
Okay.
Yeah. So now we are going to talk about different search efforts / explorations. Like from the contemporary era up to like more modern ones. And then after that, we're going to talk about the theories about what happened. So remember that Sir Walter Raleigh had to have a colony in Virginia in order for him to keep control of the area. So White, he was under the assumption, like, he thought that they had just moved. Like, he did not assume that they had died. And it served Raleigh's interests for them not to have died, because if the colonists couldn't be proven dead, he would still technically have a colony there. So.
Of course.
He liked to kind of muddy the waters and try to be a little bit more questioning about the whole thing. But in 1595, so 5 years later, after White attempted to find them, Raleigh took his first transatlantic voyage. It was ostensibly to search for the colonists, but he was really searching for the legendary city of El Dorado.
Oh my god.
Yeah. And then, in 1602, the price of sassafras skyrocketed.
Sassafras.
So we're going to go to slide 14. This is sassafras. I thought it was like a wheat plant. It is not. It is a tree.
It is.
I thought it was
tree.
like a... Yeah, wait a minute.
It's a
wait.
tree. I know.
Wait.
Yeah, they always portray it as like...
Oh, I'm thinking of saffron.
Yeah.
Saffron kind of looks like wheat, but like red.
Yeah. No. Sassafras is a tree.
Who the hell
price
knew?
I didn't. The price skyrocketed in 1602. I don't know why. And apparently there was a whole bunch of it in the colony of, or the, I guess the province of Virginia. I don't fucking know what the correct term would be at this point. So Raleigh attempted to enforce his monopoly on Virginia based on the, this is a weird sentence. I think I copied it from somewhere. Basically, hang on, I'm just going to read the sentence. Raleigh attempted to enforce his monopoly on Virginia based on the purported survival of the colonists in order to capitalize on these prices. So basically, he was like, oh, well, I have a colony there, so I'm just going to go see them and hang out and get sassafras, and because I own the area, it is all of mine, and because those colonists are still there, it is all of mine, right? So to achieve this, he sent a ship to the Outer Banks, again with the ostensible goal of finding the colonists, but the actual goal was to harvest sassafras. Those were the only two, like, quote-unquote search attempts that Raleigh did, because he didn't want to know if they died or not. Oh, so he didn't actually look that hard.
Oh, my lord.
And then regardless, he was arrested for treason against King James in 1603, which ended his charter in Virginia, and then he was eventually executed in 1618. So Sir Walter Raleigh is now out of the picture. Well. So then, also in 1603, the final and kind of only official search expedition occurred. So this was led by an English explorer named Captain Bartholomew Gilbert. So if you can go to slide 15, I think this is Captain Gilbert.
Oh, Barty Gill.
So he had explored a lot of Cape Cod. So he, like, kind of knew, like, that... He kind of knew, like, the terrain and everything, but, like, not really, because Cape Cod is nowhere near the area. They just sent him for whatever reason. So, once again, their intended destination was Chesapeake Bay, but bad weather forced them to land somewhere else. We don't actually know where. And the landing team, including Gilbert himself, was killed by Native Americans on July 29th of 1603, and the remaining crew immediately hightailed it back to England. So, yeah. Jamestown was then established in 1607 off of the Chesapeake Bay in Virginia because someone finally made it to Chesapeake Bay. So if you go to slide 16, this is just an illustration of the fort at Jamestown. So this was the first successful English colony in the New World.
Okay.
Boo.
Yeah. So they interacted with the Powhatan tribe quite a bit, in good ways and in bad. And this was the tribe that Pocahontas belonged to, so we get to talk about John Smith for a little bit. So, if you go to slide 17, this is John Smith. John Smith was the blonde dude in the disgustingly inaccurate Disney Pocahontas movie.
Wait, you mean a magic tree didn't let them fall in love?
Who, by the way, was voiced by Mel Gibson doing an American accent. By the way.
Stop.
Like,
why? I never understood why he had an American accent.
I don't know, but he did. Which, that's not even the most disgustingly inaccurate part of it. I just wanted to complain because I hate Mel Gibson.
I did not know that. Wow, thanks for ruining that movie even further.
Yeah, so...
I honestly haven't watched that movie since I was in, like, kindergarten.
Yeah, I haven't either. Christian Bale was also in it, but he was doing an English accent, because he's English.
Oh, was he that little
John
Peter
Smith.
kid?
Yes, he was.
Aw.
Anyway... John Smith, at one point, was kidnapped by Powhatans. I don't know why, he just was. He wrote later that, he had a bunch of, like, writings that were kind of turned into, like, pamphlets and, like, broadsheets and stuff, right? So he wrote in some of these that he had heard from the Powhatans that there were some tribal villages where some men wore European-style clothing and some of the houses were built in, like, a more English style. And so using this information, the colony produced a rough map with these villages marked. And in 1608, Smith sent this information and the map back to England. So if you go to slide 18, this is a reproduction of the map, which the map ended up in the hands of the Spanish because of a spy. And the only surviving copy is called the Zuniga map. I can't say that correctly. There's a tilde over the N, and I can't do that right now because I'm tired. So yeah. Smith was unable to search the area himself for various reasons, but 2 search parties were sent out and returned with no sign of Roanoke colonists living in the area. So there's that. And then in 1609, word reached England's Royal Council for Virginia that the Roanoke colonists had been massacred by the Powhatan tribe, specifically by Pocahontas' father, Wahansnica. I could not find an actual, that might be an incorrect pronunciation. I think that's correct. I'm sorry if it's wrong. Also, a lot of English sources refer to him as Powhatan or Chief Powhatan because colonists were stupid. I'm going to be using his proper name here. So.
Okay.
We don't actually know who told the council that the Powhatan tribe had killed the colonists. Like, we don't know where this information came from. I would also bet that it's 1,000% incorrect. So there's about 142 miles between Jamestown and Roanoke Island. And as far as I can tell, the Second and Powhatan territories didn't overlap. There are theories that the Roanoke colonists may have moved to the Chesapeake Bay area. That would have had to happen in order for the Powhatans to interact with them, which the Powhatans never claimed to do. But it was also like 20, 25, 30 years earlier, but still, they never claimed to interact with the Roanoke colonists. Anyway, based on all of this information, the council sent orders for the colony to relocate, but the message was delayed due to a shipwreck.
What is wrong with the ocean? Was really just like, you stupid Europeans.
Yeah.
Stay the fuck away
Stay
from
in
this
your own
country.
fucking lane, aka island.
Yeah. So by the time the message got there...
You know, if the ocean is sending you messages, maybe you should listen.
Yeah. By the time the message got there, the colony was already several months into what is now called the starving time. So this was the winter of 1609 to 1610.
This is when the cannibalism happened.
That's mine on my notes.
Oh, sorry. Listen,
No, you're fine.
You always jump ahead in my notes.
I know, I do. It's fine. So, basically, I kind of talked about this earlier. For some goddamn reason, the colonists never planned to be fully self-sufficient and grow their own fucking food.
Why? Why is that a good
know.
idea? When you're planning a community, why is that the first thing? Like, hey, and you know what?
So,
we're gonna steal from the next town over because it'll just be easier.
So instead of sending farmers or any farmer at all, they sent, like, city folk. Because, again, they were doing that whole thing where they were like, we're going to be, like, aristocrats. I really think it was a classist thing because they didn't want fucking farmers to be next to them. I really think that was a big part of it. That's just me
have fun
speculating.
being dead.
I know. That's just me speculating.
Yeah, but it sounds right.
But I think it's correct. So... They fully planned on relying on the Powhatans to get through the winters. So for the first 2 years of the colony, they got by with trading. Yes.
It just makes me grumpy that they were like, we're gonna go to this country, we're gonna steal your land, we're gonna claim it as our own, but also, can you feed us? Because we're dumb and we don't know how to make food.
Yeah. So fucking entitled.
And also, we're gonna kill you all.
Yeah.
You took my cup.
He took my silver cup. Anyway, it makes me mad, and...
Yeah.
Yep, that's all.
Yeah.
That's all.
So, for the first 2 years, they got by with trading with the Powhatans and with regular supply ships from England. But 1609 was again a drought year, and many of the supply ships couldn't make it to the colony for various reasons. They probably all crashed somewhere, because apparently that is what they all did.
Yeah.
And then... There was also a storehouse fire at some point. I don't know if it was that year or the year before, but either way, they lost a bunch of their supplies. So there were 500 residents at the beginning of that winter, and there were only 61 still alive by spring.
Oof.
And then, there is evidence that the residents resorted to cannibalism during the winter.
They found hatchet marks on some skulls.
Yes, they did. They found hatchet marks and bite marks and teeth marks.
I'm not saying we might should have given up on trying to colonize the New World, but we might should have given up.
Maybe.
It was...
Anyway.
I don't... There were a lot of signs pointing to no. But okay.
Yeah. So, with all of this going on, the remaining 61 people didn't want to relocate, so they just didn't. Which,
they
like,
were
they didn't
too
need
tired
to anyway.
And starved.
Yeah.
Like,
they didn't need to
relocate.
relocate. Like, the order to relocate was based on completely false information, so, like, they were fine. Oh, I missed, sorry. Go to slide 19. This is an illustration of Wahansnica. I completely forgot to tell you to go to the next slide, sorry. And this one isn't a racist caricature, so.
Are those, wait. Hold on.
Slide 19.
No, I know.
Okay.
What? Oh, they're feathers.
Yes, those are feathers.
They looked, from far away, the things on his shoulders kind of looked like snakes.
Oh.
So I was like, that is so
snakes?
cool. No, they're feathers. I can see it now.
Yeah. So now,
we're going
to talk about
shoulder pads, but snakes.
The
80s would have been so
oh my
cool.
God.
Okay, I'm sorry.
You guys yell at me for having long notes, and then you interrupt me constantly.
Listen, you are talking to two people with ADHD who can't shut the fuck up. We have so much to say all the time.
Our brains don't know how to not.
I know.
the amount of times I haven't said something out loud should be commended, because
honestly,
I've had a lot to say.
I have to stop myself a lot.
Oh man. Okay. So now we are going to talk about probably the biggest dum-dum in this entire story.
Oh god.
I hate this man so much. So in 1610, an English writer named William, I think it's Strachey. It's either Strachey or Strachey, and I'm probably going to flip-flop back and forth between pronouncing his last name.
Stretchy.
Yeah, so he arrived in Jamestown. So if you go to the next slide, this is just from, like, his pamphlet that we're going to be talking about, because I couldn't find an illustration, like, of him.
Is it straight?
So he stayed for about, what?
Nothing.
Starchy.
No.
Stretchy.
It's like, yeah. So he stayed in Jamestown for about 2 years, and he was briefly the official, like, secretary of the colony, because the other guy died. Like... So he was, like, kind of important, but, like, also not. Like, it was a weird thing. So, after returning to England, he wrote a book / pamphlet / I don't know what this document would be classified as, but he wrote this thing called The History of Travel into Virginia Britannia, which that is not how any of that is spelled, but that's what it is. So, in it, he described those same villages that Smith had, the ones where, like, there were people dressed in English clothing and with English houses. And he uses a lone Native American man as a source. And I believe the source note, because this is the thing that I found on Google Books, that I skimmed it. I tried to read it. I did. But it's written, like, in 1500s language, or 1600s language, so I just used the Wikipedia
That is
summary.
really difficult to read if you are not, like... immersed in that regularly.
I used to be able to read it.
Right,
I can't
same.
anymore because I haven't been doing this anymore.
Unless you are doing it regularly, just to sit there and, like, read something in, like, Old English, you're like, I'm sorry, what?
Sorry to be a dick, but it's not Old English.
That's
I know. Modern English.
I know.
Yes.
It's modern English because it's Shakespeare times.
Yes. Anyway, I believe the source note said an Indian man relayed this information, or something close to that. He didn't even name the person.
Some dude I met in the woods told me
basically, yeah.
Believe me, it's the truth.
Yeah, and then specifically, he also says that these villages were inhabited by people who escaped the slaughter at Roanoke. That is an actual quote. So, we kind of get into this later. Those villages exist, but I don't think there were people in English clothing and English houses there. We'll get into why I think that later. So he enforces, like, and, like, a lot of people think that.
Yeah.
He, like, enforces, like, that myth of these villages and demonizes the Powhatans in one fell swoop. So the Wikipedia summary for this, because again, I was not about to read it and summarize it myself. So.
Not if someone's already done the legwork.
Exactly. So Strachey suggested that the lost colonists had spent 20 years living peacefully with a tribe beyond Powhatan territory. So he assumed that they had moved to the Chesapeake Bay area, which maybe they did. I don't fucking know. Wahansnica, he claimed, carried out the unprovoked attack at the recommendation of his priests shortly before the arrival of the Jamestown colonists. Based on this account, 7 English, 4 men, 2 boys, and 1 woman survived the assault and fled up the Chowan River. They later came under the protection of a chieftain named Ayanoko, for whom they beat copper at Ritno. So Ritno is, like, supposedly one of these villages. So continuing on, the history of travel never directly identifies the tribe that supposedly hosted the Roanoke colonists. However, Strachey did describe an attack against the Chesapeakeans in which Wahansnica's priests warned him that a nation would arise in Chesapeake Bay to threaten his dominion. It has been inferred that the colonists had relocated to Chesapeake and both groups were massacred in the same attack. So, Strachey also believed that the Powhatan religion was satanic and that the priests might literally be in communion with Satan, so he used all of this as leverage for his argument that the natives should be converted to Christianity.
Dude.
So, one could
in your lane.
One could infer that he made up this whole thing just so that he could justify converting the Powhatans. So, regardless, this, like, book / pamphlet / whatever the fuck, it was never, like, published ever. And it just kind of, it fell into obscurity until it was, like, the manuscript was rediscovered in 1849. That's the only reason why we know about this. So, I don't trust a single thing that this dude says.
No.
Just, yeah. So, moving on from this. I didn't get into the why, but the Powhatans did end up attacking Jamestown in 1622. After this, there was a dramatic shift in English commentary on Native Americans. And it was at this point that they really ramped up the natives aren't human beings propaganda. A probable piece of this is a claim made by a man named Samuel Purchas from 1625. So if you go to slide 21, this is Samuel Purchas. So this is a quote from Wikipedia. He argued that the natives as a race had forfeited their right to the land through bloodshed, which... How fucking hypocritical of you to say that engaging in bloodshed means that you lose the right to your own land, but whatever. Citing the 1586 ambush of Grenville's garrison, which Grenville was another English colonizer dude, an alleged attack on white colonists, which was Roanoke, and the 1622 Jamestown massacre. Purchas offered no evidence for his claim about the 1587 colony, except to state, Powhatan confessed to Captain Smith that he had been at their slaughter and had diverse utensils of there to show. So there's no proof of any of this, and modern historians think that this was just anti-Native American propaganda.
Dude's hair can't even stay on his own damn head.
So, the last thing that was, like, at this point it wasn't contemporary, but it was, like, closer in time thing that happened. An explorer named John Lawson explored the area from 1701 to 1709. So, like, 120-ish years later. By this point, the Outer Banks region was not really traveled because they had finally figured out that the waters in the area were really dangerous.
That the ocean is trying to kill you?
To travel by ship. Yeah. So, Lawson still explored the area, including Croatoan Island, which by that point had been renamed Hatteras Island. I don't know why, it just had. And so Lawson was the first European to explore that area since White left in 1590. So it had been like 120-ish years. 110 years since a European had explored the area. So he encountered the Hatteras tribe. He noted that they had English influences in their culture, and many claimed to have European ancestry. Some of them also had gray or just like light colored eyes, which genetically for Native Americans, that's not really like a thing. So based on this and his explorations, Lawson theorized that the Roanoke colonists had assimilated into this community back in 1587. And then no research at all happened until the mid-1800s. So in the 1800s, the ruins of the Roanoke fort became a tourist attraction. I don't know why. Like, James Madison
people
went
died
there.
Here.
Yeah, I don't know why. And so that kind of like reignited interest in the Lost Colony. Archaeological surveys did not begin until 1887. And I will note, very little has been found even now. Because they're still doing excavations. A big issue is that many of the artifacts that they do find, they can be attributed to sources other than the Roanoke colony. So they could have come to the colony, or from the colony, but they also could have come from Native Americans who traded with other European settlements from that same era. So they can't reliably source anything back to the colony itself. They've also found very few human remains, which there's just a gap in the archaeological research that they have. Also, there's been a shit ton of shoreline erosion.
Yeah.
So between 1851 and 1970, the northern shore of the island, which is where the colony was located, lost 928 feet, like inland.
Holy shit.
So this leaves a good chunk of the settlement underwater.
Yeah.
So you can't excavate it because it's under the water.
Or the ocean ate it.
Yeah. So that leaves a lot of problems. So then in 2011, researchers at the First Colony Foundation, which I mentioned earlier, they were looking at a map made by John White in 1585. And they noticed two corrective patches on the map. So if you go to slide 22, this is just kind of like showing you what those patches were. They used like a light table and like figured out that one of the patches was found to be covering a symbol that represented a fort. So they were like, okay, cool, there's a fort that we did not know existed. The issue is, the symbol is not to scale, and it covers an area of thousands of acres. So, that's not helpful.
Right.
That's the thing with those old maps. They suck.
Yeah. Also, that can't be right. 1585. No, he was there before. Never mind. I'm dumb. Ignore me. So.
Also, cartography is one of those arts that is, like, so cool, but so complicated, and, like, what the fuck?
Yeah. Very complicated. Very difficult to do correctly, especially in 1585.
Right, yeah.
They still decided to excavate the area, which they named Site X, as in X marks the spot. They found some stuff over the years. The biggest thing, and probably the most recent, I think, was that in 2017, they reported finding fragments of Tudor-era pottery and weapons at this site. But again, they have to convincingly argue that those are from the Roanoke colony and not from the Lane colony, Native Americans who traded, or a trading post that was nearby and established in the 1650s, which they can't do. Like, you can't prove that. So, yeah. And again, they aren't finding any human remains. They're not finding, like, a cemetery. They're not finding anything like this. And then there have also been attempts at genetic analysis, and this is the last, like, searching kind of thing we're going to talk about. So beginning in 2005, a computer scientist named Roberta Estes has led several DNA analysis and genetic research organizations. One of these is a genetic analysis project that they want to establish a genetic link between the colonists and potential Native American descendants. So even though this all happened in like 1587, they, in theory, should be able to do this by testing Y chromosomes and mitochondrial DNA in any samples. But they can't find any samples.
Well.
They can't find any samples from either colonist or a potential Native American descendant. So it's a cool theory, but they have literally no way of testing it.
Yeah.
Which, like, sucks, because that would be a really cool way to figure out what happened, but yeah. Okay.
Well,
so
maybe don't commit massive genocide.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah. So now we're going to get into the theories. And there are a lot of them. I tried to find as many as I could, and we're going to go into, like, what the arguments for it and then the arguments against it. Because some of them, like, even some of the academic ones that aren't about zombies are, like, stupid. So, we're going to go into detail with a lot of these. So, probably, like, the second most popular theory is that the Powhatans did attack them. This does rely on the colonists having moved to Chesapeake Bay at some point, so you have to assume that that is true in order for this theory to be correct. And a lot of support for this theory comes from a historian named David Beers Quinn. So, Quinn argues that sassafras gathering expedition in 1602 might have ventured up into the Chesapeake Bay area and that they may have kidnapped Powhatans. There's a lot of maybes in here. And so this is a quote from Wikipedia. From there, these abductees would be able to communicate with Thomas Harriot, who was another associate of Raleigh's, and might reveal that Europeans were living in the region. Quinn evidently believes circumstances such as these were necessary to explain optimism about the colonists' survival after 1603. Although Strachey accused Wahansnica of slaughtering the colonists and Chesapeakeans in separate passages, Quinn decided that these events occurred in a single attack on an integrated community in April of 1607. He supposed that Wahansnica could have been seeking revenge for the speculative kidnappings by the sassafras gathering people.
God damn sassafras.
I know. In Quinn's estimation, John Smith was the first to learn of the massacre, but for political considerations, he quietly reported it directly to King James rather than revealing it in his published writings. Despite Quinn's reputation on the subjects, his peers had reservations about the story, which relies heavily on the accounts of Strachey and Purchas. Like, this just relies on a lot of assumptions and a lot of very sketchy and biased reports.
Yeah.
So I don't buy this, personally. Who knows, though? And then just moving on from that, I couldn't find any real theory that the Croatoan tribe attacked them, or really that any other tribe attacked them. Like, specifically.
Mm-hmm.
And, like, I'm not saying that, like, the Croatoans are inherently more likely to attack them. If any tribe was going to do it, though, you'd think it would be the ones that actually had contact with them. Maybe.
I mean, you would think.
You would think. But and I couldn't even find a theory that said, like, generally. They were attacked by a mainland tribe and we don't know who. Generally, if people are arguing that they were attacked by a tribe, it was by the Powhatans. I will say, I don't think they were attacked by any tribe. There was no sign that the settlement had been attacked.
Yeah, they, like, made that very clear that like there was no sign.
They may have been attacked by a different tribe later on. I just don't think that was the case.
Definitely not at the time.
Not at actual Roanoke.
Yeah, not at that location, I guess, is more of what I mean.
Can you stop being a dick over there? Get down!
Oh.
Stop it.
Okay, so the next theory is that they attempted to return to England. So they had a few boats, and they did have a ship that could theoretically carry them back to England. And it is possible that they got so desperate that they sent some people out for help. And so, this is from Wikipedia. In 1563, French settlers at the failed Charles Fort colony built a crude boat and successfully returned to Europe. Like, maybe. Alternatively, the colonists could have sailed north along the coast in the hopes of making contact with English fishing fleets in the Gulf of Maine.
They built a crude boat and went out into the ocean that is known for killing everybody.
Well, they didn't know that yet.
We shall sail home in a matchbox.
Well, they were like fucking... Apparently, these French settlers were fucking desperate to leave. And, I mean, it worked. Like, they made it back.
And I mean, like, I'm not saying it's not possible. It just seems unlikely.
Well, okay, so the Roanoke colonists, they had a ship that could have taken them back. They didn't need to build a boat.
Okay.
They had a ship that could take them back. So the type of ship they had was a pinnace. I don't know, like, what kind of ship that is.
How do you spell it?
Pinnace. It's pinnace, I know. But I had to Google how to say it. It's a ship. It wasn't large enough to carry all of the colonists back. Additionally, this is all a quote from Wikipedia again. Additionally, the provisions needed for a transatlantic voyage would further restrict the number of passengers. The colonists may have possessed the resources to construct...
I'll be right back.
Okay.
Give it to me.
What? Huh?
I don't know. She'll be right back.
I was mid-fucking sentence. What is happening?
I don't know. Yeah, it appears that they, from what I can gather, they are a small ship that is, like, sometimes part of a larger fleet.
Yeah. And it was part of a larger fleet beforehand. It just got left behind whenever White and other people went back to England.
Yeah. But yeah, like, they're pretty small. I don't know what happened to Hannah.
What?
I'm here.
Oh, okay.
What happened?
My cat, I have a piece of garland on my fake fireplace that's in my room, and it has these little white berries on it, and she likes to eat them because she thinks they're popcorn, but they're actually, like, poisonous plastic.
Oh,
and
Yuki does that.
Very naughty.
Okay. Okay, I'm just gonna start this section back up.
Yeah.
I'm so sorry.
No, you're fine. You left, like, mid-sentence, and I was like, what the fuck is happening? So...
She was being very bad.
Yes. So... The ship that they have would not have been large enough to carry all of the colonists, and the provisions needed for a transatlantic voyage would further restrict the number of passengers. So, the colonists may have possessed the resources to construct another seaworthy vessel using local timber and spare parts from the pinnace. Considering, apparently, a lot of the ships they had were built by survivors of a different shipwreck
Oh my God.
from 1609, it was... Or no, that doesn't make sense. That would have been later. I may have... Ships were built by survivors. That was 20 years later. Huh? They must have been referring to different ships. Anyway, it was possible that they could produce a second ship, right? Even with all of this happening, though, at least some of the colonists would have to be left behind. And then we still don't know what happened to them. And we don't know if that actually happened. Like, all the ships were gone. So, like, there is evidence, like, they did move. We just don't know how far away they moved.
Yeah.
So, like, it's possible
how far away
that they died in a shipwreck.
and what direction.
You know? Yeah, we don't know. So, yeah. Another theory, this is one of the ones that I'm like, this is kind of dumb, I think, and, like, kind of racist, I think. So... There's an anthropologist named Lee Miller who proposed that a group of people involved in, like, forming the colony, including Simon Fernandez, who was the guy who refused to take them up to Chesapeake Bay, and Queen Elizabeth's principal secretary, Sir Francis Walsingham, were involved in a plot to conspire against Raleigh and intentionally maroon the colonists. And so the purpose of this would be to undermine him. So this is a quote from Wikipedia. Actually, like a lot of this is a quote from Wikipedia. According to Miller, the colonists split up with a small group relocating to Croatoan Island while the main body sought shelter with the Roanoke tribe. The colonists, however, would have quickly spread European diseases among their hosts, decimating the Roanoke and therefore destabilizing the balance of power in the region. From there, Miller reasoned that the Roanoke were attacked, with the survivors taken captive, by the Mandoag, a powerful nation to the west that the Jamestown colonists only knew from the vague accounts of their neighbors. She concluded that the Mandoag were the Eno tribe, and that was one of the tribes that Smith said he heard about that had a bunch of English influences on it, who traded the surviving lost colonists as slaves, dispersing them throughout the region. Miller's theory has been challenged based on Walsingham's considerable financial support of Raleigh's expeditions and the willingness of Fernandez to bring John White back to England instead of abandoning him with the other colonists. So first off, it would have been much more efficient to, one, just kill them before, like, after they got there, or two, try to sabotage the colony from the beginning. Like, they could have just not funded him or tried to stop it from happening in the first place. This is a very inefficient method to do this, is just to leave them there and assume that they're going to be killed. Right?
Yeah.
Second, the Eno were potentially, I got very conflicting information on this, potentially first mentioned in English parlance by William Strachey, who, as we've seen, is not the most reliable narrator. A lot of sources say that the first mention was actually by Governor Yeardley of Virginia in 1654, which is about 40 years after Strachey's writings. But again, those weren't published and aren't really, like, taken seriously. And the tribe he talks about is the Anoeg, which is like, people think that maybe Eno and Anoeg were like close enough in pronunciation and writing that maybe that was what he was referring to, but we don't know. Also, I'm like 99.99999% sure that Native Americans did not keep white people as slaves.
There's a lot of, like, and I don't know if it's true, but there's a lot of writings about that.
Yeah.
Being a thing.
So
I'm just saying that. I don't know. Yeah. I don't know anything about it.
The thing is, they did have a form of what white people called slavery, where they would keep fellow Native Americans captured in war, and they would occasionally, like, trade them, but it was not remotely the same system or setup as the European slave trade.
No, they kind of, like, adopted... Well, yes. the things that I've read, they've, like, adopted the white people into the society, and they're like, you're not, like, one of us, but, like, we're gonna treat you right, and, like, so this is your new mom.
That's also what they did with the Native Americans that they captured. So they practiced a thing called kinship slavery. And this is a quote from encyclopedia.com, and I backed it up with a couple of other things, too. So, most Native American communities in what is now the U.S. South were defined by kinship. An individual was either related to the group and therefore acceptable, or was an outsider and a potential enemy. Diplomatic and trade relations with other groups often involve ceremonies adopting outsider representatives into the kinship circle. Outsider captives taken in warfare, however, were a different story. They might be adopted into the tribe to replace lost kinsmen. They might be executed in revenge for lost kinsmen, or they might become slaves. And even with slaves, it wasn't, like, near the same level of brutality as the African slave trade and how white people treated African slaves. It was not the same.
You can't make up that
thing.
Shit.
It just wasn't the same thing. It was more just like, you're my weird uncle, or like my maid, right? Like, it wasn't anything remotely like...
Yeah, because like the one that I read was like, you're our daughter maid. Like, it was this girl,
that's basically
and
how it was.
And it was like, yeah, go clean up, but also mom wants to talk to you about what you want for your birthday and stuff like that.
Yeah, and so continuing with this...
You mean they still treated them like human beings?
Yeah,
Crazy.
They did. So enslaved captives were not considered part of the kinship circle, but rather existed outside of it at the whim of their masters, quote-unquote masters, which that, again, is an English or like European term applied to a Native American system. As enemies, their lives were forfeit. They could be killed at any time, which, like, I feel like that's true of a lot of different things, but whatever. Because there was no commercial agriculture, these slaves were not cogs in a profit-earning machine, but rather worked alongside their masters, quote-unquote, at their daily chores. Their condition as slaves, which was Atsi Nasai to the Cherokee, so it was basically a non-human possession. So their condition as this non-human possession was not hereditary. So their children, if they had any, were not slaves, nor was it necessarily permanent. They could be adopted into the tribe at any time, and they often were. So there are accounts of Native Americans capturing and assimilating white women and children after some massacre, and occasionally men. That's not slavery, and they weren't trading white people. At least as far as I can tell.
They were just
right?
like, you live here now.
Yeah.
Basically, yeah. You know? And like, yes, it often was after they massacred a white village. You know? So a lot of the people that they did take, they were not taken willingly, but we get into it later. A lot of people who did assimilate into these tribes willingly or no, grew to prefer living with Native Americans than living with Europeans. For various reasons.
Why.
Right.
Which we get into later.
Basic human decency.
So her whole theory, to me, is bullshit, because they didn't, like, that wasn't how that system worked. Plus, again, that just isn't an efficient way of killing people. So we're moving on. This one's weird. So there was a local legend in Dare County, North Carolina, about an abandoned settlement called Beachland. And this is all from Wikipedia again. So, quote, the area has had reports of small coffins, some with Christian markings, encouraging speculation of a link to the Lost Colony. Based on these legends, engineer Philip McMullen and amateur archaeologist Fred Willard concluded that Walter Raleigh dispatched the 1587 colonists to harvest sassafras along the Alligator River. All records suggesting the colony's intended destination was Chesapeake Bay, and that England had lost contact with the colony, were supposedly falsified to conceal the operation from Spanish operatives and other potential competitors. According to McMullen, Raleigh quietly reestablished contact with the colony by 1597, and his sassafras expeditions were simply picking up the colonists' harvests. In this view, the colony was not truly abandoned until the secret of the colony's location died with Raleigh in 1618. After that, McMullen argued, the colonists would have begun to assimilate with the Croatan at Beachland. This hypothesis largely depends upon oral traditions and unsubstantiated reports about Beachland, as well as the 1651 map that depicts a sassafras tree near the Alligator River. A significant problem with the hypothesis is that Raleigh supposedly planned a sassafras farm in 1587 to capitalize on a dramatic increase in crop prices so that he could quickly compensate for the great expense of the failed 1585 colony. The proposed financial motivation overlooks the fact that it was another person's privateering had already recovered the cost of the 1585 expedition, and that sassafras prices did not skyrocket in value until the late 1590s, well after the establishment of the 1587 colony. So this is all bullshit, but I wanted to mention it because it is a theory that people float around. There's that whole thing. Again, it's bullshit. There is speculation that the Spanish attacked the colony. There's evidence that they knew that it existed, and, they didn't recognize England's, quote-unquote, right to colonize the area because they had already claimed it for themselves. But the Spanish were still searching in Chesapeake Bay for the colony as late as 1600, so it's likely that they didn't know what happened to them, because why would they be searching for them? And then, this one's weird too. There are these things called the Dare Stones. So, this is again from Wikipedia. From 1937 to 1941, a series of inscribed stones were discovered that were claimed to have been written by Eleanor Dare, mother of Virginia Dare. They told of the traveling of the colonists and their ultimate deaths. Most historians today believe that they are a fraud because investigations linked all but one to stonecutter Bill Eberhart. The first one is sometimes regarded as different from the rest based on linguistic and chemical analysis and as possibly genuine. It's like there's these stones that kind of say what happened, but they're all fake except maybe one of them. So no. And then I do want to take us down another small rabbit hole here and talk about Virginia Dare and what she represents. I'm sure that people have other associations, but she has been used as a symbol for white supremacy for quite a while.
Ew.
Yeah. So this is again a quote from, I think, Wikipedia. The popularity of the Lost Colony of Virginia Dare in the 19th and early 20th centuries coincided with American controversies about rising numbers of Catholic and non-British immigrants, as well as the treatment of African Americans and Native Americans. Both the colony and the adult Virginia character were embraced as symbols of white nationalism. Even when Virginia Dare was invoked in the name of women's suffrage in the 1920s, it was to persuade North Carolina legislators that granting white women the vote would assure white supremacy. By the 1930s, the racist connotation apparently subsided, although the V. Dare Foundation, founded in 1999, has been denounced for promoting white supremacists. I just wanted to mention that.
That made my stomach hurt.
I know. Well, now you get to listen to me yell about crazy people, because now we have two theories that I call the crackpot theories.
Yeah.
So the first one is that aliens abducted the colonists.
Woohoo!
Yes.
So, this is supported by the fact that there's no mass grave at the site, which, again, they may have moved, and for all we know, there is a grave, but it's underwater now due to soil erosion. But again, there was no mass grave found at the site, but whatever. And then, people also claim, like, they support this because they think that Croatoan is a terrible clue as to their location, because a note or a map would have been more helpful. Why are we judging the notification methods of 16th century colonists? How are they supposed to leave a map? Like, what? And, like, not, like, it would have disintegrated. It would have been torn up. It would have been eaten by animals. Whatever. Like, carving something into a tree or a fence post seems a lot more permanent to me than writing something on some paper that they maybe didn't even have. Anyway. That whole thing, well, Croatoan's a bad clue. It fucking isn't. It tells you exactly where they went. I don't see what the problem is. And then, there is a theory that the Roanoke colonists became zombies.
It's my favorite one.
So, there is this thing called the Zombie Research Society, which to me is an oxymoron, but whatever. So, a writer there named Andre Freeman has suggested this theory. And this is a quote from the Zombie Research Society's page on this theory. Quote, Freeman considered the findings of noted Harvard archaeologist Lawrence Stager, who unearthed evidence of mass cannibalism at the Roanoke site. He also points to reports from local tribes stating that the colonists died in a great war within their own ranks. He goes on to suggest that the relative isolation of the settlement and time elapsed before the return of the supply ship would allow for the remaining colonial zombies to rot back into the earth, without any humans left to feed on, so no way to spread the infection. The zombie outbreak would have simply died off. I wish you could see what I'm doing, like my face right now, because
I can just imagine your little fists all clenched.
So first off, zombies aren't real. I feel like I shouldn't have to say this, but apparently I do. Zombies aren't real. No one explains where this solo zombie outbreak, like how it occurred. Like,
the aliens clearly brought the plague, Shannon. Come on.
Right.
Like, if this were true...
It's because it was isolated on an island, and then they all died out, and then virus just died out with them.
They weren't that isolated.
Right.
They regularly interacted with Native Americans.
Exactly.
So in theory, this mysterious zombie-causing disease would have also infected Native Americans.
You know,
also, was it a bacteria? Was it a virus? Was it airborne? Like, how did this spread?
Listen, you're asking too many questions here, friend.
Don't bring
also,
facts into this, Shannon.
I have to. So, I also couldn't find any evidence that local tribes actually did state the colonists died due to a war within their own ranks, and he doesn't provide a source for this claim. Like, no, like, contemporary, or there's no source that says that. I have no idea where he got this from.
Yeah.
And I also can't find where that archaeologist Stager said that he found evidence of mass cannibalism. So he did excavate the site. I can't find the article that he published about it. Like, it was in the Harvard Alumni Magazine, apparently, but I couldn't find the article. So, but in order for there to have been records of mass cannibalism, there would have had to have been human remains found at the site, and we found, like, none. So those two things cannot exist at the same time. So, it wasn't zombies. And this was the part where I was getting really annoyed at BuzzFeed Unsolved, because they were presenting, well, Ryan was presenting this as equally possible as, like, other...
I mean, to be fair, he was laughing about it.
I know. It's just one of those things where I'm like, okay, there's very clearly other, like, possible options, so why are we even presenting this one? Because it's complete total bullshit. And so finally, most historians favor the theory that the colonists assimilated with a local Native American tribe. This one makes the most sense to me, and this has been a theory since at least 1605, and it's what John White thought happened in 1590. So, quote from Wikipedia, if this integration was successful, the assimilated colonists would gradually exhaust their European supplies, such as ammunition and clothing, and discard European culture, such as language, style of dress, and agriculture, as Algonquin lifestyle became more convenient. Colonial-era Europeans observed that many people removed from European society by Native Americans for substantial periods of time, even if captured or quote-unquote enslaved, were reluctant to return, but the reverse was seldom true. Therefore, it is reasonable to postulate that if the colonists were assimilated, they or their descendants would not seek reintegration with subsequent English settlers. So this also casts doubt on those settlements that Smith and later Strachey heard about, because it doesn't really make sense that they would be continuing to wear European-style clothing 20 years later or force their building styles onto the Native Americans. That doesn't make sense. And so, like, as far as I can tell, those settlements that Smith talked about did exist, but the only evidence of the claim that they were full of European stuff seems to have come from John Smith. I can't find anything, and most scholars can't find anything, that says that Wahansnika, like, directly said this. It's just Smith said that Wahansnika said this. And then Strachey heard about it from Smith. And then there's also skepticism among historians of the accuracy of Smith's writings, especially about the Powhatan tribe. So, like, we don't know if that claim is true because it was only Smith saying it, and there are inaccuracies in his writings, like, that we can kind of point to. Like, there's one, because there is that story of Pocahontas and how she, like, saved him from being killed or whatever. He relates the exact same story as something that happened to him in Turkey. The exact same fucking story. Like, with the same details, that a young girl stopped her father from killing him, basically. And so it's like, okay, so did this happen to you twice, or are you getting your stuff confused?
Or are you just making shit up?
Or are you just making shit up? So, I personally think he was just making shit up. Because this one claim against contemporary reports saying that, oh, whenever white people go into Native settlements, they don't leave them. And they adopt Native American culture, clothing, language, all that. So, like, this one, like, these settlements existing outside of that norm is very odd to me. And again, it's only that one white dude claiming that a Native American person told him this. So, like, it's just weird.
Yes, but he's a white man, so you must believe him.
Yeah, it's just weird. So, just continuing with this, it is widely accepted that the Croatoan were ancestors of the 18th century Hatteras tribe, although evidence of this is circumstantial. So there are a lot of, like, tribes back then and now that are kind of like amalgams of different tribes that joined together and created kind of a new tribe. And the Hatteras, they think, are one of those tribes. And then the present day Roanoke Hatteras tribe identify as descendants of both the Croatan and the Lost Colonists. We have no way of knowing if that's true, but that's how they identify themselves. This part's weird, but I wanted to mention it. So, quote from Wikipedia, in the 1880s, state legislator Hamilton McMillan proposed that the Native American community in Robeson County, so they were then considered free people of color, retained surnames and linguistic characteristics from the 1587 colonists. So he said, hey, there's this community of Native Americans in this county, and they have surnames and linguistic characteristics from the colonists, which was 300 years later, but okay. His efforts convinced the North Carolina legislature to confer tribal recognition to the community in 1885 with the new designation of Croatan. The tribe petitioned to be renamed in 1911, eventually settling on the name Lumbee in 1956. This was likely done to get them to join his political party, and this theory fell out of favor in the early 20th century. Yeah. And then historians seem to debate this theory more than others, but probably because it's the most popular claim. And the main reason for the debate is that there is just no evidence one way or another. And so, like, I personally think that this is what happened. This is the hill I'm going to die on. I will still say, people, especially recently, have been publishing books and things saying, like, we definitively know what happened. It's like, we don't, because we can't prove it, right?
Yeah.
And so there's the issue I brought up earlier about accurately identifying artifacts. There is an issue with the reliability of contemporary or closer in time sources. Like, some even doubt John Lawson's accounts from 1709 of the Native Americans that he encountered who claimed English ancestors and had gray eyes. Like, we just don't know. There's also the issue of hostile relations between the colonists and local Native American tribes. They were working on rebuilding those relationships when White left. It is entirely possible they did rebuild those and moved to Croatoan Island in order to more easily benefit from that good relationship, and then they assimilated into the Croatoan tribe. It's possible they went up to Chesapeake Bay and assimilated into another culture. It's possible they went inland, like on the actual, like, you know, continental U.S. inland, like the mainland, and assimilated with a completely different tribe. It is possible. And I will say, like, that's what White thought happened to them. Some historians do think they may have split into two groups, with only some of them going up to Croatoan Island specifically. Like, I can't think of any other reason why they would carve Croatoan into a tree other than as a message as to where they were going. Like, that doesn't make sense. Like, why would you do that?
Yeah.
Especially when you told him, I will give you a message as to where we move if we move. And then I also
It was literally the plan.
Yeah. I also think that sometimes the simplest solution is the most likely one. And this is the simplest solution. And then just, this is my last little point. To me, a lot of the theories, other than this, that have sprung up are based in anti-Native American sentiment from the English, on very sketchy reports from very biased people, and on really big leaps of faith and a lot of assumptions. Or they're just flat out insane, like the zombie theory. So, that is all I have on the Roanoke colony. I need food, so any comments or questions, or I feel like I was as thorough as I could be.
No, I think you were thorough.
So what you're saying is zombies.
Yes, it was the zombie aliens.
That's totally what I'm saying. Yeah, totally.
That is the takeaway from this episode. Ignore any and all facts. And
listen, I can say whatever I want, but Shannon's gonna kill you in your sleep.
That's true.
No, Shelby hasn't been sleeping.
Yeah,
so.
That's true. I'd hear her coming.
Probably because she's afraid of you.
No.
On her toes.
Oh, God, I'm more afraid of my cat than Shannon, let's be real.
Yeah. So yeah, that is probably a very too thorough discussion of the Roanoke colony.
Cool.
Yeah. Yeah. Our ending is that we have no ending. Long live the Emperor. Goodbye.
Bye, guys.
Goodbye. Thanks for listening to The Triad. Our music is by Scott Buckley. Our audio is recorded by our sound engineers, Craig Bott and Audrey Credo.
If you like the show, please rate, review, and subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. You can also follow us on social media. We're on Instagram, YouTube, and Tumblr as The Triad Podcast.
We're also on Patreon as The Triad. Currently, all Patreon funds will go towards the cost of hosting the show. Each tier has its own rewards, but every patron receives our undying gratitude. Do you have comments, questions, or stories? Email us at thetriadpod@gmail.com. And thank you again for listening to The Triad, where we're spooky but sensitive.